For 70 years, the FBI kept these data confidential. At last, the startling truth about James Dean has come to light. What actually transpired on the day of his death is revealed in a secret interview just discovered in the cellar of a deceased woman. The most unsettling aspect, though, James Dean was blackmailed by his older male boyfriend after he informed the military he was gay in order to avoid being drafted. It was all covered up by Hollywood. Even worse, it appears from his last statements on tape that he was aware that death was imminent. "It may be my life that you save." In 1931, James Dean was born in Marion, Indiana. Despite their youth and lack of wealth, Winton and Mildred, his parents, provided him with everything they could. His father was now a dental technician instead of a farmer. His mother, from a Methodist household in a tiny town, was kind. She had lofty goals for her lone child. After James's father was hired by a veterans hospital, the family relocated to California when James was 6 years old. Despite their limited resources, they lavished him with toys and instruction in their modest Santa Monica apartment. Other kids teased him because his mother demanded that he study the violin and tap dancing, but she wanted more for him. She previously expressed her desire that her son would grow up in a genuine place, and stated California felt artificial. Then everything was different. James's mother passed away from cancer when he was 9 years old. He was devastated. She had been the one person who truly understood him and his best friend. His father was unable to raise him by himself when she died. James was so transferred to live with family in Indiana. He never truly bounced back from that setback. "My mother passed away when I was 9 years old," he once blurted out in an interview, and he never quite got over that pain. The urge to connect, that profound ache. Later, the sense of abandonment would influence the strong characters he portrayed in movies. His acting conveyed that anguish as if it were emanating directly from within. He returned to Indiana and settled at the farmhouse of his aunt and uncle outside the little community of Fairmount. They gave him their own bedroom because he loved the furniture, and they welcomed him with open arms. Work on the farm included assisting with crops, milking cows, and feeding pigs. However, there was also enjoyment. His uncle let James to ride his motorcycle across the fields, lighting up the pond for ice hockey in the winter, and constructed basketball hoops in the barn. He kept bunnies, a pony, and even stalked rats in the barn as if they were game. He once made a joke about how the farm was like a stage, and that he only put forth his best effort when someone was looking. James began performing in school plays during his high school years. He stood out in addition to being good. He became president of the drama club after joining it, and even used Dickens' dramatic reading to win a major speaking competition. His teacher encouraged him to keep going because she recognized something unique in him. He returned to California to live with his father and stepmother after graduating in 1949. Although he claimed to be studying law when he entered in college, he actually registered in as many acting classes as possible. He soon abandoned the legal notion entirely and enrolled at UCLA to pursue a degree in acting. His dad detested the choice. James, however, was at last in his element. After landing a part in a Shakespeare play, he enrolled in an acting class taught by James Whitmore, who recognized his genuine skill. His life would be changed by Whitmore's advice to go to New York and take acting professionally. James therefore packed up and departed once more in 1951, this time in pursuit of a dream. He took whatever job that came his way while he was in New York. Being a stunt tester for the game program Beat the Clock was one of the most peculiar. James tested the absurd tasks that contestants had to complete to make sure they were effective. The issue? He was too skilled. Producers couldn't tell how long ordinary people would take, because he performed the feats so fast. Thus, he was sacked. However, even this strange work demonstrated his physical prowess and tenacity. During that period, he also had trouble getting little movie parts. He had little parts in movies including a Dean Martin and Fixed Bayonets, as well as a Jerry Lewis comedy, but no one took note. To make ends meet, he was even working as a parking lot attendant. He didn't give up though. He heeded Whitmore's counsel and enrolled at the acclaimed Actors New York workshop, where Lee Strasberg taught him method acting. It was a big thing to get in. He proudly wrote to his family about becoming one of the youngest members ever. He used television as a training ground. He made appearances in dramatic shows such as General Electric Theater, Kraft Television Theater, and Danger. He was able to explore and be honest and emotional throughout these performances. He played a disturbed adolescent in One Piece Omnibus, and the portrayal was so realistic that it was difficult to forget. The character he would go on to become famous for was hinted at in that part. However, he appeared in a Pepsi commercial for his first time on film. Even his early performances as a young disciple in a TV Easter special provided a preview of the passion he would bring to the film. Then came the turning point in the story. He was cast in the Broadway production of The Immoralist in 1954. He portrayed a cunning and enigmatic houseboy. He was uncomfortable with the part, but he gave it his all. Elia Kazan informed the screenwriter that he wanted someone who looked like writer Marlon Brando when he was searching for a replacement for the character of Cal Trask in East of Eden. James Dean Paul Osborne had an idea. Thus, they set up a meeting between Dean and the book's author, John Steinbeck. Dean did not sit well with Steinbeck. He considered him odd, even disagreeable. However, Dean seemed a good fit for the position. Steinbeck agreed despite his own sentiments. Dean departed New York to start filming in Los Angeles on April 8, 1954. Cal had a big part to play. It told the story of a boy who was begging for love from a father who was always ignoring him. Fully recognized that emotion. He hardly had a contact with his own father, and had lost his mother when he was a little child. His actions reflected such grief. While the majority of performers at the time adhered strictly to scripts and instructions, Dean did not. His acting was methodical. He kept to himself, shunned the other performers, and allowed his own feelings to influence his portrayal. Many people on site were irritated by this. The actor who portrayed his father, Raymond Massey, became particularly irritated. However, Kazan adored it. He encouraged Dean to continue, even claiming that the moments were improved by Massey's annoyance. Dean frequently disregarded the script. He made it up as he went. He wasn't always accurate. He simply followed his emotions wherever they led him. One scene stands out as the pinnacle of such rawness. The father says that Cal must return the money when Cal tries to give it to him as a birthday present. The script didn't specify what Dean did next. He hurried to Massey and gave him a heartfelt embrace instead of walking away. The entire set was in disbelief. Kazan retained the recording. Dean's facial anguish wasn't pretending. It was authentic. Critics were divided when East of Eden was released in 1955. Audiences adored the plot. However, others felt it was too blatant. They perceived something genuine in Dean. His performance was described as nearly excruciating to see by one critic. The film was a success. They knew they had a star, Warner Brothers. Dean became the first actor to receive an Oscar nomination after passing away. Even Steinbeck, who had not been a fan of Dean, praised the film over his own work. However, Dean was under pressure despite all of this achievement. A threat from a guy from his past appeared just before the film's release. Rogers Brackett was his name. Early on, he had provided Dean with housing and a role in a radio drama, although they had been more than just friends. Their relationship had soured by 1955. Brackett desired cash. He filed a lawsuit against Dean to recover costs. Although the connection was not mentioned in the records, both men were aware that Dean's career would end if news spread. Dean made the payment. He consented to pay Brackett $800 in installments. In order to silence Brackett, Warner Brothers even offered him a finder's fee. Dean kept vanishing from the Rebel Without a Cause set around this time. We now understand why. Rebel Without a Cause, the sequel, would go on to become as famous. Nicholas Ray, the filmmaker, recognized himself in Dean. They were both loners. Neither had a strong father role in their upbringing. They grew close, perhaps too close. Ray made the stage feel like a weird family. Adults were not invited to the events he hosted for the young actors. He was dressed like Dean. To fit in, wear jeans, a white t-shirt, and bare feet. According to some, Dean and Ray were essentially co-directing the film. In the movie, Dean's red jacket served a purpose beyond appearances. It was a declaration, shown out in contrast to the drab 1950s fashion. Teenage rebellion was symbolized by the entire ensemble, which included pants, a white shirt, and a red windbreaker. Even the 1949 Mercury he drove is now a part of American history. The heart of the film came from Dean's moments with Natalie Wood. However, the situation was complex. Wood was just 16. Dean was 24. Additionally, it was believed that Wood and 43-year-old filmmaker Nicholas Ray started dating behind the scenes. On television, that tension was evident. In a well-known scene, Wood's character Judy nearly jumps over a cliff during a fatal automobile race. Jim, played by Dean, extends his hand, takes it, and gently draws her back. Because the anguish that led up to it was real, the moment felt real. The chicken run was one of the film's most talked about moments. Jim and Buzz, two youths, race stolen automobiles in the direction of a precipice. The winner is the last one to leap out. The game is risky. To choose who drives what, they toss a coin. Jim works on his leaping. Buzz doesn't. Buzz tries to leap when the race starts, but he discovers his jacket is trapped on the door handle. He is unable to go. His vehicle crosses the line. This is a terrible time. Not only because of the collision, but also because it conveys a deeper message about the lengths males will go to in order to demonstrate their bravery. James Dean put his everything into his last movie, Giant. In his role as Jet Rink, he had to portray the same man throughout a variety of life stages, from a youthful, untamed man to a bitter elderly millionaire. Dean used more than cosmetics to make the transformation seem plausible. He altered his stance, grayed his hair, and put padding to his body to make himself appear heavier. As the movie progressed, his voice grew progressively more worn out, illustrating the toll that life had done on Rink. Feeling like someone who has been harmed and recalcitrant over time was more important than merely seeming older. Dean tended for unfiltered emotion in his previous appearances. Here, however, he was more meticulous and cautious. He was now creating something rather than merely responding. He demonstrated how much he had developed as an actor in Giant. Just before he passed away, the scenario behind the scenes was as intense. During the initial days of filming, Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson quickly became friends. They both found solace in each other's presence while being in terrible marriages. But when Dean showed up, everything changed. He genuinely made a move because he didn't want to feel excluded. He would reposition the seats so that Taylor faced him rather than Hudson. He kept the attention on himself by making jokes and flirting. The three of them were tense, and it showed in their moments as well as off-camera. There was absolutely no rapport between Hudson and Dean. Taylor frequently had to intervene to diffuse their frequent arguments. To make matters worse, some even claimed that Hudson had made a move on Dean. But even with all the arguing, they were both deeply affected by Dean's passing. Taylor had to be admitted to the hospital because she was so devastated. Despite his distaste for Dean, Hudson started crying. George Stevens, the director, had his own conflicts with Dean. Stevens preferred order, clarity, and professionalism. Conversely, Dean trusted his intuition. He frequently arrived late, sometimes by several hours. He refused to hit his marks on the floor, or even follow the script. Rather, he would hide behind his hat, slur his lines, or toy with props. It made Stevens nuts. He even said at one point that he would never again collaborate with Dean. Unfortunately, that proved to be accurate. Additionally, Stevens was concerned about Dean's offset conduct, particularly his risky passion with fast automobiles. He even forced Dean to sign a contract that forbade him from racing while the movie was being filmed. Stevens once had Dean's automobile seized because he believed the young actor was endangering his life. Stevens recognized Dean's brilliance despite all the headaches. He assigned him the challenging position of Jet Rink, allowing Dean to demonstrate his full range of abilities. However, Dean did not survive to witness the film's completion. Shortly before the final weeks of shooting, he was killed in a vehicle accident. This put the filmmakers in a challenging situation. The sequences where Dean murmured too much to be understood needed improvement, although the majority of his scenes were finished. In order to dub over a few words, the director called in Dean's close buddy Nick Adams. The entire set was rocked by the accident. Taylor's anguish was too great for him to continue working. The defeat weighed heavily on everyone. Nevertheless, Stevens managed to make the movie cohesive. Giant was a success when it was eventually released. People adored it. Even though Dean's performance was not completed, it was lauded by critics and made an impression. The heartache of knowing Dean would never age was reflected in the melancholy of seeing an older, damaged Jet Rink. For his role in Giant, Dean received a second posthumous Oscar nomination from the Academy. A year later, an actor receiving 2 nominations after passing away has never occurred before. For East of Eden, he had already gotten one, and now, he received 2 Oscar nominations despite only having 3 films to his credit. It was uncommon to get that type of acknowledgement, and it demonstrated something significant, was more than just an emblem of adolescent disobedience. He was a serious performer who possessed great talent and passion. That legend was cemented by his part in Giant. He also held the record for the most posthumous acting nominations in 2009, according to Guinness World Records. James Dean had a very unusual romantic life. It began when he was still a UCLA student. The actress Beverly Wills captured his heart. They were more than simply a couple. They committed to getting married. However, things didn't work out as expected. One night at a gathering, Beverly was invited to dance by another man. Yes, she replied. That little incident triggered Dean. His jealousy burst. He yelled, fought, then rushed out according to witnesses. The relationship ended after that. Later, Beverly claimed to love him, but his growing notoriety and strong feelings made things too tough. He met Barbara Glenn when he relocated to New York after Beverly. They were together for 2 years. Dean sent letters expressing his emotions throughout that period, some of which went on to fetch thousands of dollars. He voiced his displeasure with a play he was working on in one letter. He knew it might be a hit, but he labeled it rubbish. Above all, he pleaded with Barbara to pay him a visit. She was missed. He felt isolated. The letters revealed a different side of Dean than the public's perception of him as a renegade, but a doubtful, yearning guy. Pierre Angeli followed. He could have fallen in love with her. When they first met, she was an Italian actress who worked in the area. Away from Hollywood cameras, they spent peaceful weekends together at a seaside home. Although they discussed the future and exchanged gifts, her devout Catholic mother disapproved of nor did the studio want him to get married. Dean was astonished by Pierre one day. When he was in New York, she said that she was getting married to someone else. Dean arrived across the street on his motorcycle on the day of her wedding. He revved the engine throughout the ceremony. According to others, Pierre later separated from her spouse. She also acknowledged that Dean was her one true love before passing away. However, Dean's romantic tales weren't only about women. William Bast, his closest buddy, eventually disclosed something that not many people were aware of. In addition to a brief physical relationship, he and Dean shared a deeper bond. When Dean was getting ready for a movie, it happened on a trip to the desert. Even though that aspect of their relationship ended, they remained close until Dean passed away. Bast's account gave Dean's true identity a deeper dimension. Someone looking for a connection, wherever that may be. The studio, meanwhile, was hard at work molding Dean's public persona. His appearance was intended to resemble that of a heterosexual Hollywood star. Thus, they set up dates and picture shoots with young actresses. Ursula Andress was in one of the most well-known. On his motorcycle, they were spotted cruising about, attending activities together. However, things weren't always easy behind the scenes. Dean left her behind to play drums at a nightclub on their first date. Nevertheless, in order to assist them project the image they wanted the world to see, the studio made sure their photos were published in periodicals. The automobile he purchased a few days before to his death perfectly embodied that image, rebellious, wild, and stylish. Dean received a silver Porsche 550 Spider on September 21, 1955. He dubbed it Little Bastard, and had the number 130 painted on it. When Alec Guinness, an actor, saw the automobile, he experienced an odd sensation. He told Dean that if he drove it, he would die. That warning materialized precisely 1 week later. Dean had a brief interview to promote his picture Rebel Without a Cause, just 13 days before the tragedy. He concluded with a driving safety warning. "The life you save could be your own," he was meant to say. Dean, however, altered it. "The life you save may be mine," he added. That was an odd time. Despite never being heard, the line became eerie after what transpired. Dean left for a race in Salinas, early on September 30th. Rolf Wutherich, his mechanic, persuaded him to drive the Porsche to break in the engine even though he was meant to tow it. Dean was stopped for speeding around 3:30 p.m. They made a brief halt at a little shop a few hours later to get a drink. There Dean met up with other racers and agreed to meet up later that evening, but he never did. A young man called Donald Turnipseed attempted to turn left in front of Dean's Porsche on a California freeway just before 6 o'clock in the evening. Dean was moving quickly. He may have been 55 or perhaps more. It was too late for him to swerve out of the danger. It was a violent crash. Dean's automobile flipped through the air according to witnesses. He was seriously injured. Everything was broken, including his limbs, jaw and neck. Before he could get to the hospital, Dean was gone, but his mechanic lived. People arrived to aid after the collision. A female looked at his pulse. It lacked strength. He was taken to the closest hospital by ambulance. But the physicians were powerless to help. He was only 24. The second motorist, Turnipseed, left the scene with just minor wounds, but he lived with the consequences of the collision for the rest of his life. Dean's tale continued to be told in the years following his passing. It expanded. His picture came to represent youth, tragedy and revolt. When he passed away, his estate was only worth around $100,000, but it grew into a huge enterprise. It was making $5 million annually by 2012. Following that, there were legal disputes as studios and even Twitter users attempted to capitalize on his name. However, the estate maintained authority. They were aware that they had a legend, not simply an actor. More than 500 pages of James Dean's private correspondence and documentation were discovered during an unexpected auction in 2023. The estate of James Deasy, Dean's former agent, who passed away in 2008, provided these documents. They were confined for over 70 years. They now told a narrative that had never been witnessed before. A few of the documents were startling. Dean's intended marriage to actress Pierre Angeli was discussed in one letter dated August 12, 1954, but what was most surprising was how it brought up his draft status. It implied that Dean had previously evaded drafted status by claiming to be gay. According to the records, Dean disclosed to the draft board that he was living with Rogers Brackett, an older affluent guy who was known to be gay. He was also financially supported by Brackett. Then there was another twist. Later that year, Brackett had filed a lawsuit against Dean to recoup his money. In early 1955, the case, which no one had previously heard of, was discreetly resolved for $800. Dean's major break in East of Eden came just before this. A controversy like that may have put an end to his career at the time. It makes sense why it was kept a secret. The records not only resolved long-standing misunderstandings over Dean's draft background, but they also demonstrated how cautiously he negotiated a society that didn't have space for someone like him. After purchasing some of the documents, researcher Jason Colavito discovered official records indicating Dean had undergone 2 examinations for the draft, one in 1951 and another in 1954. However, that wasn't the only finding. An earlier interview with Dean reappeared about the same time. Despite being published in 1955, hardly anybody had ever heard of it. It was like listening to Dean's voice from the past as I read it today. Everything people believed to be true about him was called into question by his remarks. He was viewed by most admirers as the quintessential renegade, anger-filled, erratic, and wild. Dean, however, spoke differently throughout the interview. He spoke about his early years and how, following the death of his mother, he grew up in a little town. He enjoyed living in the country. He participated in athletics. It didn't sound defiant at all. He also said that his Hollywood home resembled a scene from a storm. However, he was concentrated and serious when acting. He did not become famous by accident. He had desired it. He had been guided from a potential legal profession to the theater industry by a mentor called James Whitmore. Dean was also not a believer in instinct alone. He did extensive acting studies. He employed methodical strategies such as reviving past feelings. He spent days alone himself to get into character while filming East of Eden. One of his co-stars, Julie Harris, recalled his intensive rehearsing style, had disagreements with people in the industry as well. At one TV appearance, he got into a fight with Ronald Reagan because the latter didn't enjoy his ad-libbing. "I wasn't trying to be difficult," Dean remarked. All he wanted from his performance was the truth. More of Dean's personal difficulties were disclosed as the conversation progressed. After his mother passed away, he acknowledged that his relationship with his father had never really recovered. He didn't provide a definitive response when questioned about romance rumors. Rather, he said that he dated women mostly because they were aware of the acting technique. "Everything else is noise," he replied. He talked about the items he purchased, records, cameras, and even a horse, as diversions rather than as luxuries. These were methods to satisfy the void that accompanied loneliness and stardom. This was followed by the last interview, hours before he passed away, in September 1955. It was recorded. In a discussion with actor Gig Young, Dean was advocating for vehicle safety. He referred to racing as freedom. "The life you save may be your own," he said in the screenplay. "But the life you could save could be mine instead," he continued. It was chilly. Death didn't appear to frighten him. He even said that he would at least be doing what he loved if he passed away. Now the moment seems like a spectral warning. He yearned for authority, yet was attracted to peril. What followed is what complicates all of this. His film studio Warner Brothers recognized an opportunity to mold his reputation. According to documents, they further promoted the Rebel label following his passing. To keep the conversation going, they even floated speculations that he could still be alive. Fans, however, gradually became weary of the notion. The truth was what they sought.